My name's Quick Pick Nick, and we finally made it to NFL Sunday as I debut my brand new model alongside a full slate of NFL games and show you my favorite lineups for both FanDuel and DraftKings. And yes, this brand new model has already proven effective, which you should have seen if you rode alongside us for Thursday Night Football, as my model chose the absolute best combination of 5 players for the single game contest, coming in second only to lineups which had Cooper in the MVP instead of Brady, so it would seem that these marginal improvements have come a long way already. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any more of these blockbuster nights shared by the Quick Pick Network, and without stalling any longer such that I'd forego my namesake using my millions of simulations and in-depth data analysis, here are your locks and lotteries for Week 1 of the 2021 NFL season, Sunday, September 12th. And for those of you who are new around here, the term lock means my model has a high confidence of success for that player to outperform his fantasy cost, and lottery means there's relatively less confidence but still a good likelihood to exceed his expectations given his cost. Starting at quarterback, my model locked in Joe Burrow for only $7,200 on FanDuel and $5,700 on DraftKings. Burrow seems to be one of the best picks on either platform right now, as he is severely underpriced given his performance early last year before his injury. Burrow averaged around 18 fantasy points per game last year, only falling below 17 fantasy points in contests against top 5 defenses. Minnesota is obviously not a top 5 defense, with FanDuel ranking them as 28th in the league, leading to ample opportunity for Burrow to have his grand return alongside his multitude of young receivers. Plus, if you needed any kind of confirmation to this projection, FanDuel Sportsbook currently ranks Burrow as the second most likely quarterback to throw for the most passing yards in Week 1, behind only Patrick Mahomes. If you're not sold on Cincy though, a lottery quarterback you could switch to is Kirk Cousins, who will play against the Bengals and is coming off a much better season in 2020 than most give him credit for, averaging around 20 fantasy points per game. Now for the running backs, I'll first address the white elephant in the room, and that's Christian McCaffrey, costing $10,400 on FanDuel and $9,500 on DraftKings. McCaffrey is a lock. There's just no two ways around it, especially on the DraftKings side of things. Even with only 3 games from last season, McCaffrey was able to display his value for the Panthers, averaging 27 fantasy points per game on FanDuel and 30 per game on DraftKings. That kind of output is more than some pairs of running backs combined, and being able to get such value from just one position at a comparable price to other options is a must-have for any lineup. Another essential lock at the running back position is James Robinson, who will resume his lead back role for the Jaguars after Travis Etienne's unfortunate preseason injury. Robinson's cost fell dramatically with the addition of the rookie Etienne, and now with Etienne out of the picture for 2021, Robinson will naturally pick up right where he left off, carrying the ball almost 20 times per game in 2020 and going against one of the worst teams in the NFL of Houston this week. If you really like another running back, I'd recommend trying to get him in the flex, because these two guys are going to be crucial, with McCaffrey scoring 2 players worth of points in one position and Robinson scoring as much as some of the top options with a cost among the bottom. Skipping over the receivers for now, one other player I'd consider a definite lock for this slate is Travis Kelce, and I see Kelce as a similar pick to McCaffrey. No other tight end in the NFL can consistently put up massive numbers like Kelce can, and while Kelce might not outscore other tight ends to the extent that McCaffrey does to other running backs, Kelce still manages to score more than the rest of the tight ends by a factor of 1.5 or sometimes even 2, justifying his massive price tag. On DraftKings though, even for Kelce, the cost might get a bit expensive, so if you're looking to downgrade, a few viable lottery picks found in some simulated lineups are Logan Thomas, given an elevated role with Curtis Samuel inactive, Kyle Pitts, who is very cheap but yet to prove that he can dominate in the men's league, and Austin Hooper, even cheaper with a streak of huge games at the end of last season. Obviously at this point, we'll be saving most of our money at the receiver position, mostly because there are a lot of cheap guys here who have a strong chance to score a touchdown as the number 2 or 3 option on their team, or even the number 1 on a bad team. There are a bunch of viable combinations here, making all of these picks lotteries, but I'll break down the players that I've found to be most common in my top-ranked simulated lineups, as well as showing you a few of my favorite completed lineups at the end of the video. However, if I had to pick just one receiver to call a lock, I would recommend Mojo Marvin Jones Jr. Again, many top-ranked lineups didn't have this player, so I'm still calling him a lottery, but for only $5,800 on FanDuel and $3,600 on DraftKings, which is especially low and certainly worth taking on DraftKings, Marvin Jones has a huge opportunity in his new home down south. Jones played a significant role for Detroit last year, still managing 12 fantasy points per game on FanDuel and 15 per game on DraftKings in one of the worst sports franchises to date. And now with one of the best prospects out of college throwing him the ball in Trevor Lawrence, Jones should be able to exceed his numbers with his new team. Our next lottery receiver is Brandon Cooks, who's a lottery for the obvious reason that his quarterback is Tyrod Taylor. Taylor has been able to get the job done in the past, but he's still a massive downgrade from Deshaun Watson, so it remains to be seen if Cooks will be able to maintain his 13 to 16 point per game pace with the new QB. Playing against Jacksonville should help and hopefully allow Taylor to get the ball to his definitive number 1 target on the field. Brandon Ayuk is another valuable receiver, as even though he's a bit more expensive than these first 2 guys, he will be the top option in San Francisco, playing with a for now healthy Jimmy Garoppolo against a forever all-full Detroit defense. Another set of lotteries is pretty much any Bengals wide receiver, including Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. Your guess is as good as mine when it comes to which of these young players will take the top spot on the team, but against that Minnesota defense I mentioned earlier, these guys will benefit just as much as Joe Burrow with respect to their fantasy outputs. At flex, you could take any of the players I mentioned earlier. You could take a risk on one of the rookies like Najee Harris or Kyle Pitts, who are both extremely cheap on DraftKings compared to FanDuel, so that might be worth a separate lineup or two. Or you could take a top guy I haven't mentioned yet if you somehow have the budget. It is worth noting that tight ends in particular seem way underpriced when put side by side with receivers and running backs in the flex position on DraftKings, meaning I would lean in that direction if you're looking for advice there. Finally, defenses are really tough to predict early on in the season, as we saw with the season opener of Cowboys-Buccaneers, which is why my model typically will try to go as cheap as possible without picking a blowout. In this case, a few that my model found on DraftKings were the Falcons, Colts, and Jaguars, while the FanDuel version skewed towards the Browns, Titans, and Giants. All in all, we're still yet to see even a single snap from any of these teams, so using last year's data to predict this year's results might be ineffective, but that wasn't the case Thursday night and should prove to be significant this Sunday. As promised, here are a couple of completed lineups, one for FanDuel and one for DraftKings. Again, there's a lot of variability at the wide receiver and flex positions in particular, but if you're looking for a solid foundation to build your own masterpiece, I'd recommend starting with Burrow, both running backs, Kelsey if you have the money, and a cheap defense. In any case, here's to another massively successful year of locks and lotteries, starting fives, and more content to come throughout the year. After subscribing, let me know in the comments what works best, what formats are easiest to digest, and what you all enjoy the most. This has been Quick Pick Nick, the intersection for sports, data analytics, and speed. Thanks for watching.